Lord Sauron. Unfortunately, Frodo was saved by his friends, and he is now in Rivendell. Granted, he doesn't know where he is or how he got there. Much like what Gandalf did with Bilbo when Thorin and company got caught by goblins, he would do the same to Frodo here. "Where am I, and what is the time?" Frodo would ask. Gandalf would tell him that it was 10 a.m. on October 24th. Frodo would have a lot of questions that Gandalf had answers to. While he already knows a lot, initially his main motive was to visit Bilbo. However, he wore the ring and the Nazgul could still see him. He almost became a wraith, which Gandalf would inform him of later. Unlike his uncle Bilbo, Frodo was closer to our powers when he arrived, and unconscious of the idea that there was a combined effort to overcome the Nine. But for us, this was our first steps. We gave him a Morgul wound. Frodo and his friends really had much nerve going over to Weathertop. But see, we were hoping that would keep him from reaching Rivendell for two reasons. The first is that Rivendell was originally established as a refuge for the elves by Elrond, and now also for the other incarnates, apparently. And secondly, by reaching Rivendell, Frodo would have been saved from the Nazgul going from our realm, Weathertop, to the realm of our enemy, since Elrond has one of the three rings. See, as we have mentioned before, Rivendell was meant to be the safest spot since it was made after we destroyed Eregion, and much to our dismay, Rivendell got stronger after Thorin and company left the quest, as Bilbo became a resident after he decided to retire there after his 11th birthday. This is due to their bonds of friendship. Our enemy made it so that Frodo's desire to visit Bilbo there and his prescribed quest can go together. Our goal is to destroy all of that and keep Frodo from reaching Mordor with the One Ring. See, while it seems they will have a council tomorrow, it's not hard to see that Frodo will be the chosen one, as he had brought the ring all the way from the Shire to Rivendell. Bilbo gave up his ring to Frodo under Gandalf's request, and we all know how well Gandalf gets on with our enemy. Now, Frodo has it, but little does he know, there will be a council since they are just now starting to notice our powers. Meanwhile, Frodo will be told all the things from Gandalf about how he ended up there. Here's the main caveat. Frodo thinks he is safe now as he has made it to the other side of the chaos, to our dismay, of course, but Gandalf warns him that they aren't and gives him a grim assessment of what's going on. He adds a spin to what Rivendell is known for. Evil things do not come into this valley, but all the same we should not name them. The Lord of the Ring is not Frodo, but the Master of the Dark Tower of Mordor, whose power is again stretching out over the world. We are sitting in a fortress. Outside it is getting dark. This is great news. As the Fellowship discusses their plans on what to do with their ring, we have plans to destroy their plans and actions. All we must do is to mess with the mind of the ring bearer. Gandalf thinks by not acknowledging us by name, the hobbits will successfully destroy our deed. However, little did he know, our powers will remain the same no matter what. He said it himself. He is just so naive. That our powers stretching out all over the world. But this time, it will be better than before as there will be a ring bearer of the ring when our forces are at its strongest. Bilbo briefly wanted to take it as he had enjoyed his powers such as invisibility, but he was too old to deal with the powers of your ring. Frodo is the perfect age according to our enemies. He is 50. When Bilbo was 50, he really slacked off, but now our forces are at its strongest, so we won't make that same mistake with the new ring bearer. It seems Frodo is the most likely as he carried the ring to Rivendell, but they will have to discuss it still in the council. Your trusted companion, Melkor Morgoth. P.S. Make sure the ring bearer and his companions are aware of your powers. Remind them of it with every chance you get. They will want to give it up easily. And make sure they get as closely attached to the ring as possible. Make sure they'll want to keep it. Even Bilbo initially wanted to keep it for a while, thanks to your power. My servant. Our subject is now standing at the top of the fires. Until then, he has been grinding and grinding, taking a ring to Mordor with only one other subject, his servant, friend and loyal companion. His deed in taking the ring to Mordor was seen as the greatest sacrifice that he could do for the love of his home in Middle-earth according to our enemy. However, despite fighting against our powers, the hobbits at home don't see it as this great sacrifice that it is, especially compared to the deeds of the other characters in Hobbits. Just because the ring will be gone doesn't mean you will, as you are immortal, though you also need the ring to be at your peak. While the ring is gone, you will remain a weakened spirit and good for nothing. This is what we have feared. What will happen if the most powerful thing in your life is no longer there? Life will be a mess. I've always mentioned to you that our goal is to stop Frodo from taking the ring to Mordor. This is still our goal, though unfortunately the probability of this is getting less and less. But there is still one final moment. Say it with me. I have come, but I do not choose now to do what I set out to do. I will not do this deed. The ring is mine. Ask him to do the same. He will say it along with you. Put on the ring and vanish, as he should. Unfortunately, our enemy recognizes Frodo's pity for Smeagol as he orchestrates the idea of having Gollum fall into the fire with the ring, after recognizing his plea for one last moment with his precious. After Frodo says the words, the enemy intervenes as Gollum fights for one final moment with it, his precious, and falls unwillingly into the fire with the ring, marking your downfall. Let's move on to the subject of recognitions. Frodo and Sam will be recognized shortly after in the field of Cormallen, but this ring bearer will not be remembered in his homeland as the attention will be more on the other three hobbits and their deeds, especially Samwise Gamgee. Sam will be pained that little attention was paid toward his friend and master, Mr. Frodo, for his deed in taking a ring to Mordor. This is the deed of our enemy, as he rewards his efforts due to his pity and mercy. That is, pity of Gollum for wanting to put on the ring and disappear. Bilbo also had the same pity. That is our greatest joy. We laugh in this matter. Ha 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 ha. The other hobbits will be recognized as making more of an effort or having more love for the world than Frodo. This is a contest. For example, Sam will be the only one to stick by Frodo along the way as he falters, thanks to our powers. Saved Frodo from Shelob and carried Frodo on his back, and is referred to by many subjects as the true hero, as he embarks on a journey that was not his own. The other two, Merry and Pippin, will have battles of their own and will be seen in their own ways. Our enemy doesn't want us comparing their efforts and recognizes Frodo for the deed that he did in doing what he was tasked, to take the ring to Rivendell before taking it to Mordor. While Sam was revered for going on a journey that was not his own, along with his numerous deeds for Frodo, Frodo's journey was for everyone in Middle-earth. But we don't want anyone to know this. We compare their efforts to see which ones are better or more heroic than the others. The issue is that Frodo's story is just not as interesting as the other three hobbits. See, our enemy views Frodo as the one who saved Middle-earth by carrying a ring to our lands in Mordor. I have convinced the hobbit townsfolk in the Shire that despite carrying a ring to Mordor, he was just an odd hobbit, and his story is just boring. This is partly my convincing and partly human instinct thanks to my convincing. We've convinced them that it's just not as interesting of a story to tell as, say, destroying a spider like Sam did, or willfully giving up the ring, and it's just not easy for an average hobbit next door to relate to someone who would be performing such a great deed in taking the ring to Mordor. Our job is to bring him down to that thought, as I've convinced him that he couldn't do it earlier, causing him to give it up to larger subjects such as Gandalf, Aragorn, and Galadriel, and now he has to prove himself worthy to have his journey be remembered and to be seen long after by making it into the Red Book of Westmark, started by his uncle. So, we must instigate the point of comparison. Comparison of which deeds are the most important ones. While our enemy deems that of the ring bearer is a very important quest and adds grace to his pity for Smeagol, we must make him forget that. It is also a time to get in his head of his deeds. First, we tried to stop Frodo from taking the ring to Mordor, and I got him to question his deeds, to see what he had done as a broken failure by replaying that final moment where he puts on the ring and disappears. Then, we get through to him by his injuries. Frodo was injured on October 6th in Weathertop and again on March 13th by the spider Shelob. Even though he recovered from it very well during his quest, our goal is to not only have him mentally but also physically brood over it by giving him these injuries again. What's left of you will be evident by his nightmares of these injuries, last glimpse of pride and a desire of the ring, and regret of its destruction, as it was with Bilbo. Though I may come to the Shire, it will not seem the same, for I shall not be the same. That was actually a temptation out of the dark, a last flicker of pride, desire to have returned as a hero, not content with being a mere instrument of good. And it was mixed with another temptation, blacker and yet in a sense more merited, for however that may be explained, he had not in fact cast away the ring by a voluntary act. He was tempted to regret its destruction and still to desire it. It is gone forever, and now all is dark and empty, he would say as he wakens from his sicknesses. Lastly, Frodo was never meant to go back to the Shire. This was his companion, Sam's trajectory, with whom I've clouded his judgment with. Frodo's path is evident by his dreams in Crickhollow and at the house of Tom Bombadil. However, I've made him forget about it or at least put it to the wayside. Our enemy views Bilbo and Frodo as special kinds of hobbits who have exceptional relationship with the Eldar. Our goal is to pigeonhole him into the hobbit box once he gets home, and to remind him of who he was before, and that he's only supposed to go back to the Shire to live his life like a normal hobbit. It would just be weird to do anything but. Rule on. Melkor Morgoth. Dear Sauron, Frodo is now at Crickhollow. After selling Bag-End to Lobelia, he would finally leave the Shire to move into there. I thought he didn't like Lobelia. I tried to keep him bitter for years. He would meet an important elf, Gildor, who would be very pleasant to him and would acknowledge him as one of his own. This was the worst thing since Bilbo went for a stop at Rivendell after he got back from his quest to find treasure in the Lonely Mountain. With Bilbo, Thranduil acknowledged him as one of his own, and now Gildor with Frodo. When will this ever end? This is because years ago, a new dimension to Middle-earth was formed. It was a doomed island called Numenor. Meanwhile, there was an unusual father-son relationship that will repeat itself at various times. During the time of Numenor's destruction, Elendil and Horendil were living and your reasoning was sharp as it allowed you to win people over when your powers were getting rusty. Our focus was mainly on keeping them bitter at the elves and Valar for their immortality. However, the hearts of the faithful were too strong, which limited the control I had over certain Numenorians. I hated every minute of it. Thankfully, I had the king's men, who decided to form a group against our enemy. A central theme to Middle-earth and Arda is the rebellion of our powers. This would limit the control I would have over them. With the Valar, I decided, they like light, we give them darkness. They know how much I hate it. The light, the blinding light. Meanwhile, many of the happenings of Middle-earth involve an idealized father. First, it was Elendil and Horendil, and now Bilbo and Frodo. They are very peculiar creatures. In 2941 of the Third Age, Bilbo becomes an unlikely hero for doing something out of the ordinary for hobbits. Before that, I tried to convince Bilbo of his bag inside and not go on his adventures. After all, Bilbo's home was just like a typically wealthy hobbit, inherited after Bungo his father. However, he finds himself caught up on his adventure and even finds a ring. He was able to later discover the power in invisibility. Meanwhile, Bilbo will be there and back again, and towards the end of his journey, Thorin realizes his courage. I fought so hard to not let that happen, to not let Thorin give Bilbo an ounce of credit. You know how much I hate when hobbits and dwarves get along with each other. All of them, elves, dwarves, men, and hobbits were supposed to be sworn enemies. As Bilbo returns, he and Gandalf make a final stop at Rivendell. You know how much I hate that dreaded place. And Thranduil acknowledges his services to the Eldar by giving him that title. Thus, the attention is drawn to Bilbo's makeup inherited from his mother, Belladonna Took, and their odd on hobbit-like qualities. While Bilbo initially went for the finding of treasure, the attention is drawn to the finding of the One Ring. We laugh at this matter, because that way, it gives us more to play with and to control. Bilbo still didn't know the ring other than the idea of it being a magic ring. Now, Frodo is at Crickhollow, as we have mentioned. Much like Bilbo, the attention has been drawn to his odd un-hobbit-like qualities. Frodo and Bilbo will often be found visiting the elves and dwarves. I tried to keep them from establishing such ties, but they were convinced that this was their task. As a result, Bilbo would know much more Elvish than the average hobbit. This is not only by design of his mother, but also by design of our enemy, who created Bilbo and Frodo as different from the other hobbits. How dare they? After all, there are specific customs that each creature has to follow. While some of them overlap, others don't. I had swayed them to such customs to create division between creatures. The hobbits have the strongest customs of all. They would never have any adventures or do anything unexpected. So, when Bilbo and Frodo would be found visiting other creatures, they would be going against what hobbits normally do. Bilbo and Frodo are hobbits, not elves nor dwarves, and our job is to continue reminding them of that. I had tried to convince Bilbo of that for the longest time since before he went on this adventure, but his heart was too strong. He is an elf friend, bummer. This means our control over him will wane. We tried to give him one last glimpse of our control by convincing Bilbo to keep the ring, but unfortunately he gave it up. Thankfully it was to Frodo, which means when one door closes, another door opens. Tonight, Frodo would have a dream about being in the Undying Lands. Since he is a ring bearer, he would have a special calling from the elves, Valar, and most of all really, our enemy, some way, somehow at this point. Our goal is to remind him that this was a scheme played on by our enemy, and that his role is really to go back to the Shire and be with his own kind forever. This dream will tell him that after he accomplishes his deeds, he would one day go to the Undying Lands. What nonsense is this? After all, he is a hobbit, and hobbits don't typically go to the Undying Lands. This is what elves do. Meanwhile, the Númenóreans wanted it so bad they died once they reached Aman. After that, the Valar decided to leave that realm to the elves. Why would Bilbo and Frodo want to go there anyways, and to do things in that realm that won't be told home by their hobbit friends? That will further increase their weirdness. Your master, Melkor Morgoth. Lord Sauron. Please take note of the hobbits. You know, those hobbits that will eventually take the ring to Mordor. The earliest of them started sometime in the Third Age. You have known about the men and elves for quite a while, which is why they were more likely to succumb to your power. However, the hobbits will not be so easy. Remember how hard it was for Galadriel to succumb to you despite her being an elf? It will be even worse with the hobbits, at least initially, but once you follow my plan, they will be so easily corrupted. Mwah! This is because they will be most concerned with matters of the Shire, their gardens, and their simple little lives. But have no fear, this is your chance, since at least one of them will be taking the ring to Mordor. Let me take a moment to tell you about the history of the hobbits. Since they are most resistant to your ring, they will be among the chosen ones. I am going to show you how this all came to be by telling you about their histories. They would find the men and elves west of Eriador, between the Misty Mountains and the Mountains of Lune, with a remnant still there in the Dunedain. However, such earlier settlements were long forgotten by the time of the hobbits. This is why, while you have already tried to claim the elves and men and have war with them, you haven't been able to reach the hobbits yet. One day you will if you follow my lead. Just trust me, my little servant, especially since you came to me admiring my power. Not only are hobbits considered by our enemy the unlikely ones, but they also have their own little system. Unlike the elves, men, and dwarves, the hobbits even established their own land. The hobbits took the land for their own with the last battle of Furnos with the witch king of Angmar, choosing their own chiefs, a thane, to hold the authority of the king that was gone. At once, the western hobbits fell in love with their new land, and they remained there, and soon passed once more out of the history of men and of elves. While there was still a king, they were in name his subjects, but they were, in fact, ruled by their own chieftains and meddled not at all with events in the world outside. In 1601 of the Third Age, the Valarhide brothers, Marcho and Blancho, went from Bree to Argilead, the High King Infernus, crossing the Brown River Baron Duin, with other hobbits following them, passing the bridge of stone bows, taking all the land to dwell between the river and the Far Downs. They were asked to keep the great bridge in repair and acknowledge the lordship of Argilead II. Thus began the Shire reckoning, for the year of the crossing of the Brandywine, as the hobbits turned the name, became year 1 of the Shire, and all later dates were reckoned from it. As a result, the years of the Third Age will be found by adding 1600 to the dates of Shire reckoning, which goes to show they have their own little world, the protection, if you may, from our wills. There are 3 types of hobbits: the Harfoots, Stores, and Fowlhides. The Harfoots were browner in skin, shorter and smaller, and they had more to do with the dwarfs than the other 2 types. They started moving west early, going into Weathertop. They were most normal and representative, as well as the most numerous, and more inclined to settle into one place. The Stores were broader and heavier in build and lingered long by the great river Anduin and were less shy of men. They came after the Harfoots and followed the course of the loud water southwards and would dwell there for a short period of time before moving northwards. Lastly, the Fowlhides, such as the Tooks and Masters of Buckland, came afterwards, being the least numerous in the northerly branch. They were more friendly with the elves and were more skillful in language and song than crafts and preferred hunting. Since Merry and Pippin were Tooks and Masters of Buckland, they would fall into this category, the Fowlhides. Frodo and Bilbo would also, since Frodo is half a Brandybug and Bilbo is half a Took, which is why they would be so resistant to the ring. Sam Gamgee, however, would be partially raised by Bilbo. He lives in Bagshot Row and is now walking along with Frodo to take the ring to Mordor. Sam is also a vulnerable character, but in a different way than Frodo. Sam is a gardener. He worked for Frodo and Bilbo in Bag End as he lived down the street. Unfortunately, he eavesdropped on Frodo and Gandalf as they were talking about your power and your ring, so he will be going along with Frodo to Mordor, as Gandalf will be too powerful as a wizard and a fellow Mayan. While they may be the most unlikely creatures who will always surprise our enemies, the most vulnerable one will be whomever that ends up being the ring bearer. Because you really slacked off when Bilbo had your ring in his pocket. You didn't show up for Bilbo when he went off to Lonely Mountain, which was exactly what Gandalf wanted. This is why the wizard of all the Istari would be picking one of them to take the ring to Mordor. He thinks that you won't be as easily swayed by the hobbits, at least not as much as Gandalf himself or even the elves and men. It would be worse than Sauron, one would say, if Gandalf took the ring to Mordor, as they would fight fire with fire, which is what we want to do. So this is why Gandalf appointed Frodo. And when he did and looked at the one ring in his hand, we reminded Frodo that he can't do it. We made him feel helpless on his way and showed him all the benefits he could have by just putting it on and disappearing, which he did at Bree. Another point of vulnerability is friendship and fellowship. Frodo and Gandalf both know he can't do it on his own, so they appointed a fellowship. This idea of a fellowship would be that Frodo would be the main ring bearer and the other characters would follow him and aid him along the way. The moral of the quest would be that they can't do it alone, and when Frodo is reminded of that by his comrades, I convinced him that he must go to Mordor alone, but Sam was just too stubborn to let Frodo go alone. Pippin wasn't supposed to be looking at the Palantir, though he did, which was why you initially thought he had the ring. In that sense, since you thought Pippin had the ring, he spared Frodo, but really Frodo ended up being the chosen one, so now it is up to you to stop him from taking the ring to Mordor. Now, Frodo's already been out with his trusted companion, Samwise Sam Gamgee. He was an interesting character, and his main motive was to accompany Frodo to Mordor. When the fellowship broke up, Sam vowed to stand by his side. It might be difficult to separate the two, but I'll see what I could do. At the very least, I should appoint you to stop Frodo from taking the ring to Mordor. Let's jump back to the moments before that for a second, where we made our last attempt to separate a friendship. Boromir joined after his brother had a prophetic dream and sought help from their father. Boromir eventually agreed to accompany Frodo as part of the Fellowship, though his main motive was to save Gondor. Boromir sought the ring. We convinced him it would protect and defend the realm of Gondor and his people. But would he really have done that with the ring? Obviously not. It was our greatest ploy, Sauron, to allure Boromir to the ring so much that he would take it from Frodo. This will not be the first time we would allure a character to a tangible object by breaking the bonds of friendship, their biggest obstacle to fulfilling my will. As we discussed before, you were able to break the bonds of j.r.r, the final king of Númenor, and Amandil, the last lord of Andunia of Númenor. That was what I feared would be your biggest obstacle, though you were able to convince j.r.r on the pitfalls of the Band of the Valar. What is friendship anyways? Friendship doesn't accomplish anything. Friendship is a fluke. Friendship necessitates giving up the most precious things in our lives. We convinced that if j.r.r kept Amandil in their council, then they both would die anyways. If not, they both would die too. Our job is to convince that friendship doesn't accomplish anything tangible, is a fluke, and necessitates giving up the most precious things in our lives. If j.r.r didn't cut ties with Amandil, he would not have been able to discover his desire for immortality. This is why one of our significant tactics is to separate the members of the Fellowship. My main tactic involves using your truest desires, highlighting their different viewpoints, personalities, and backgrounds, and desires from each other, and using said differences to pit them against each other. For example, we were able to separate Boromir from Frodo by convincing Boromir that Frodo didn't know what he was doing and Boromir knew better than Frodo what to do with the One Ring. This was very easy to do for a hot second. After all, Boromir was a brave and skilled warrior who was loyal to his realm Gondor. Unfortunately, Frodo stuck to his plan, which was why he was chosen to take your ring to Mordor. Now that Frodo and Sam are well off on their way, our goal is to get Frodo into this cycle of wondering whether he should be even doing the quest anyways, and for him to potentially leave the quest. Make him forget all the ring nonsense. This is your ring. How dare he try to take it to Mordor? He might even throw it in the fire, ending anything you have with it. Fëanor didn't like when people bothered with his Silmarils and when I lusted over them. See, he thinks I lusted over them, but I just enjoyed them and wanted the Silmarils to take back my power over his. You will be similar. While it will be a bit challenging to get through to them, once you get to the ring bearer, he will become one of your own, if not now, right when Frodo reaches Mount Doom. He will already have gone through months of starvation and exhaustion to the point where he can't be convinced otherwise. It's never too late to stop them from taking the ring to Mordor, until it is. Ta-ta for now. Melkor Morgoth. My dear Sauron, as you just confirmed, the Hobbit's name is Frodo. Frodo was told by Gandalf to have pity for Smeagol, and this pity will serve him at the end, especially as since your ring is too strong for him or anyone to willfully destroy it. Gandalf has convinced him that few can make it, and Frodo was one of the few. Frodo tried in the beginning to let it go and still put that thing in his pocket. He is out with Sam Gamgee, his loyal and trusted companion. See, Sam is more of a representative hobbit than all the others, even Merry and Pippin. In the beginning, it was revealed Frodo's closest friends were actually Merry and Pippin, but later Sam came into the mix. This is because Merry and Pippin came from the same wealth Frodo has. Sam did not. Sam worked for Frodo and Bilbo, his gardener. However, since Frodo is the one with the ring, it was much easier to get to Frodo than it is to get to Sam. We also know much more about Frodo than we would about Sam, considering that Frodo will be the main ring bearer. See, Frodo without the ring is just like any other hobbit. As we have discussed, hobbits aren't exactly schemable, so to speak, when compared to the elves and men, for example. However, Frodo with the ring, voila! We could even continue stopping Frodo from taking the ring to Mordor all the way until the very end. Right before the Fellowship departed, Frodo and Gandalf had a conversation about your ring, and this is where they discuss the pity of Smeagol. Since his older cousin, his uncle Bilbo, would have pity for Smeagol, Frodo should too. This is why Smeagol is still around. There's a strange element in the world that is called pity or mercy, which Frodo is now experiencing. Pity of wanting to put on a ring and disappear. These are some of the greatest virtues defined by our enemy. While Frodo is the chosen one in the sense that no one else would have done the deed, the truth is he volunteered to take the thing to Mordor out of a thing what our enemies would call love. Love for his home and for Middle-earth. Little would he know, this is what makes Frodo the most vulnerable, as our mission is to keep him from nurturing this love for Middle-earth to make the ring and Frodo one of us. As we can see now, Frodo's stakes are unbearably high as the ring bearer. He's carrying your ring and is trying to fight against you when your forces are actively working. When Bilbo had the ring, he really slacked off, which is why he was able to merely enjoy it as a ring of invisibility. This happened at Weathertop, as Frodo wore the ring, despite being warned by Gandalf, possibly at the prompting of some of our enemies not to. After wearing the ring, he was stabbed by a Morgul blade as they could see him clearly. And so would I. This is why Frodo is the most vulnerable character to mess with. As the ring bearer, the one who would be taking the ring to Mordor, this would grant him the most vulnerability to our schemes, one that gets closer and closer until he gets to Mordor, if he ever gets there. Gollum was originally named Smeagol before he got corrupted by the One Ring. However, under the Misty Mountains, he would find himself to still acquire both characters, Smeagol, his good side, and Gollum, his prevailing one, the one that lusts for the ring. While squabbling, he lost his ring and wanted to look for it, and Bilbo came. Bilbo asked a question and Gollum started a riddle, which was promising for having Bilbo corrupted by the ring. However, that would nearly happen much later, before the cruel wizard Gandalf asked him to give it up. But Bilbo didn't want to kill Gollum and have the ring to himself, and Gandalf has now instructed Frodo to do the same. So right when they finally see him, Frodo now has pity for Smeagol. Sam would not have this pity, as he does not know about it yet. His main motive is to protect and stand by Frodo. That leaves Sam to contemplate killing Gollum. That way, Gollum will never be their guide. Sam doesn't consider himself to be heroic or even brave. However, this causes him to be vulnerable as well, as it also had an ingredient of pride and possessiveness, that of thinking he knows what is best for Frodo. This is what we want, and what we see in Boromir, but in a different way. See, Boromir thought he knew better than Frodo what to do with the ring. Sam, however, wants to leave the task to Frodo, but he is seeing Frodo and his pity for Smeagol and could learn from that. Never let him. If he learns from Frodo, that would make destroying the ring much easier. We don't want that. We want it to be harder for them. In other words, let Sam lean on this pride and possessiveness. Make sure he never sees and forgets any pity Frodo has shown for Smeagol. Now that Frodo sees Gollum, he pities him because they both have experience with the One Ring while Sam hasn't. See, when Frodo leaves Amon Hen, he says he's going to Mordor alone. But Sam says, "Of course you are, and I'm coming with you," and Frodo accepts. This is because Sam and Frodo knew they wouldn't be able to make it out alone. We must stop them. Despite having convinced Frodo he must go alone, Sam still comes running. One could say that Frodo was not made to be in this world, he was made to be in Aman, which is evident by his ring bearing. However, this applies to all the characters that they are meant to be in other realms, or life outside of Middle-earth in many ways, Aman or not Aman. Our job is to convince them that there is nothing else to come after Middle-earth and Aman. Should you fall, Sauron, Frodo would get all the honor and glory and be invited to go to Aman. With the ring, he can be invisible, live longer, and many more. Gollum has the same idea. He loved when no one could see him when he wore the ring. Gollum is already a wretched creature. He is in his 500s now, while Bilbo will be nearing 130. Most hobbits live to be 100. Sure, the old Took, whom Bilbo's trying to outlive, lived to be 130 without the ring, and Bilbo knows it, but we don't want that to give him any hope. We must keep Sam from reaching the point of pity for Gollum. However, it seems that this disagreement that Frodo and Sam have, unfortunately, will not be big enough to separate their bond. But we still have Sam and Gollum, but you will need to find another way. See, the point is not to side Frodo with Gollum, it's to pit Frodo and Sam and Gollum. All need to be pitted against each other. You need to pit all of them against each other, even Merry, Pippin, they'll be separated soon. Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf, for the sake of your ring. With your ring, that should be easy. As a result, they'll all want the ring so much that they'll risk their friendship to do so. That happened to Boromir. We convinced Boromir that he knew better than Frodo what to do with the ring. Unfortunately, due to Frodo's conversation with Gandalf, Frodo stuck to his guns, and he is now well off on his way to Mordor with Sam. Boromir died after defending Merry and Pippin, which we tried to stop. Our enemy would say that he died defending those he loved. See, as I may have mentioned before, our enemy has this idea that hobbits, different characters, are supposed to work with each other, not against. Let me explain. Frodo is the ring bearer while Sam will be by his side. He saves Frodo more and more as Frodo gets weaker, all because he's not carrying your ring. That way, when there come a time when Sam must help Frodo carry the ring, we can convince Sam to keep it forever, like we always do with all the other ring bearers. Remind Sam of the large garden he would have, and it is not merely a large garden. It's Samwise the Strong, hero of the age. Remind him of all the powers he would get and all the wild fantasies. Armies will flock to him as he would march to the overthrow of Barad-dûr. Since Sam is a gardener, his vision of great power would be a large garden of trees and flowers that brought forth fruit. Much like Bilbo, his ring of invisibility, and his 11th birthday joke, the ring promises to give more of what they like. Alas, Frodo and Sam will go through Shelob's lair, and Frodo will get caught by Shelob with the ring. That way, he'll be one of us now. He'll have the ring forever. But Sam will do all that he can to save Frodo, all the while figuring he would go to Mordor himself, throw it into the fire, and then come back to Shelob's lair to die with Frodo. Good plan! That way we can claim both Frodo and Sam. Both will become one of us. Sam will never throw the ring into the fire no matter what he says, thanks to your power. Since separating their bond doesn't seem to work, we will try other motives. Then, make sure Sam offers to share the load once he sees Frodo worn out and exhausted from carrying your ring, as he starts to be around it for longer. That will really trip Frodo up and separate the two, as Frodo's had the ring for so long and will be too weary and exhausted to see beyond your motives. This is the perfect moment. No, you won't, you thief. Frodo doesn't want Sam to be burdened with the ring. Make sure he knows that, so he would insist on doing it all by himself. The One Ring is not meant to be taken to Mordor alone. Sure, a single hobbit can be a ring bearer, as Frodo would be a majority of the time, but he would need to be helped by the other characters. The key is that Sam can help Frodo so much because he was not carrying the ring for nearly as long as he was. We convinced Frodo otherwise in the beginning. Frodo offered the ring to Gandalf, Aragorn, and Galadriel. However, they all knew that it wouldn't work out, so we were busted. And lastly, the thing about Frodo is that he's so complex to the human eye. He cannot be put into a box. All the characters we fooled, Fëanor, Ar-Pharazôn, even some of the other members of the Fellowship, Boromir, they all were easy to fool by the human eye because they already had their desire for power. Sure, Frodo wanted to save Middle-earth, though his task was a bit eccentric, the whole taking the ring to Mordor thing. Frodo might have been a challenge without him being the ring bearer, but by virtue of being a ring bearer, he would be much easier to fool. Mwahahaha! Maybe Frodo should think twice before accepting the task of taking the ring to Mordor. Your precious comrade, Melkor Morgoth. My dear Sauron, remember that one ring you made thousands of years ago? After Isildur failed to destroy it, The wizard Gandalf, one of the Astari, would call on a little hobbit named Bilbo to go on an adventure in the lonely mountain to reclaim it from the dragon Smaug. And indeed he did, albeit reluctantly at first, and found the One Ring when he encountered Gollum, who kept referring to it as his precious, though Bilbo would not know that at the time. It would be seen as a magic ring, and he would keep it in his pocket while going about his daily tasks. It wouldn't be until long after he arrives home he would recognize the ring for what it is, though it was mainly what it could do for him. This time, Bilbo's younger cousin, whom he endearingly calls his nephew due to their 78-year age difference, Frodo, would be called upon by Gandalf to take the ring to Mordor. He adopted him a number of years ago when poor Frodo lost both his parents in a boating accident. By then, Bilbo would already have had the ring for 60 years and will mainly see it as a magic ring. He went to his 71st birthday party with it and used it to disappear as his final joke. Bilbo was just having his fun until the cruel wizard Gandalf decided to show up at Bilbo's home and tell him to give it up for his Frodo, just because he was 78 years younger, like a son of sorts. Bilbo was already used to the ring. He didn't want to give it up. But Gandalf would already have Frodo's plans in mind. Frodo was going to do what he could, try to find a way to Mordor and go as far as his strength of mind and body allowed. This strength would be given to him by Eru Ilúvatar, typically referred to as the One in the Third Age. First, Bilbo was going to Rivendell. Then at Rivendell, there would be a council led by the host, Elrond, who would decide along with Gandalf who would take the ring to Mordor, and it is up to us to stop him from his tracks. Bilbo would see Frodo for a few moments and the ring draped around his neck. "Have you got it here?" he asked in a whisper. "I can't help feeling curious. After all I've heard, I should very much like just to peep at it again." Poor Bilbo will be left alone to his own devices, except for the brief few days when he meets Frodo and Fellowship. He needs the ring to fulfill his desires when his son is out fulfilling quests. "I feel thin, sort of stretched," he would say earlier on, "like butter spread over too much bread." But little would he know, he would get bored. Bilbo would be longing for the ring even years later, when Frodo will be well on his way to Mordor, with his fellowship of nine surrounding him. We must stop him from his tracks. We must stop Frodo from taking the ring to Mordor. It is your job, Sauron, to remind Bilbo to keep the ring. Remind him of all its benefits. It allows him to be invisible and crack jokes the way he did at his 11st birthday party. Speaking of which, it allowed him to live to be at least 71. Hobbits typically live to be about 100 or so, and Gollum, who possessed it before Bilbo, is in his 500s now. Bilbo has enjoyed it for 60 years, and the ring will unfortunately be taken from him by Gandalf, a member of the Astari, to be given to Frodo. And should the ring land on Frodo's hands, make sure Frodo knows where it came from. And should Frodo be brave enough to stand on top of the pits of Mordor, make sure he says the words, "I have come, but I do not choose now to do what I set out to do. I will not do this deed. The ring is mine," puts on the ring and vanishes. Oh well, at least we'll increase their lifespans. Your trusted comrade, Melkor Morgoth. My servant Lord Sauron. It has come to our attention that Bilbo has left the Shire after giving up the One Ring. We tried to have him keep the ring, but instead, you let Bilbo give it up and run off to Rivendell to write his book. This means your control over him will wane. Bilbo will be set free from our control of his desires, especially his growing desire of the ring. This is what we have feared and dreaded. We had seen this coming, but we didn't know it was going to be that soon. There are a lot of things peculiar about Bilbo and Frodo. According to the other hobbits, he is considered very unusual in many ways. Bilbo held your ring for 60 years, and there were a lot of consequences we call advantages that really stirred up a lot of the other hobbits. For example, they found his youthful looks very peculiar, being much the same at 90 as he was at 50. Bilbo also was able to become invisible whenever he wanted. This was also our doing, as it was with Gollum when he had the ring. They loved this, as no one could see them when they wore the ring during their respective times with it. This frees them up to our schemes, such as thieving. We rejoice in this matter. Meanwhile, last night was fabulous, but I hated every minute of it just as much as I hated the Spring of Ardor in the First Age. Hobbits having parties and celebrating? Ugh, this was why I ended the Spring of Ardor. However, one good thing came out of it. Bilbo last used it to become invisible at his party last night, and it startled all the hobbits. This is because he didn't know our powers. He didn't know the ring was your ring, that was, until Gandalf asked Bilbo to give it up shortly after, as he suspects something peculiar about your ring. We still left him ignorant of the similarities of Bilbo's magic ring and your ring, as ignorance is bliss, especially when it comes to the ring. We were so close to seeing Bilbo claim it as his own. We even got Bilbo thinking that Gandalf wanted the ring for himself. See, our enemy views Bilbo's and Frodo's uniqueness as the main reason why they can be ring bearers for so long. Their adventurous spirits allowed them to be up for challenges such as claiming Lonely Mountain or taking the ring to Mordor. Most hobbits wouldn't be up for such tasks. Bilbo is a descendant of the Tooks, who were known for their adventurous tendencies. But even his adventurous spirit is different from any other Took. This was also very unlike most hobbits. Most hobbits were like his father, Bungo Baggins, or even Bilbo himself before Gandalf invited him on adventures. In addition, they would also be found going off to visit the elves and dwarves, and this desire is needed for such adventures. This is highly revered by our enemies so much that they have distinct titles. Thranduil finally calls Bilbo an elf friend at the end, though they saw signs of it long before. Bilbo was always off visiting the dwarves, which was why Gandalf went along with him to Lonely Mountain. They had developed a habit of visiting the elves and dwarves, especially as Bilbo got back from his adventures. I made sure Bilbo knew about his peculiarities. Our work is cut out as the other hobbits think he and Frodo are peculiar and weird. That is in their customs. Each of the types of subjects, the elves, dwarves, men, and hobbits, they have a culture and a custom that they would follow. For example, the elves were meant to be ethereal and have a ton of wisdom and knowledge, while the dwarves were meant to be tough grinders but also be rowdy and fun. Sure, the dwarves were made by a Vala Aule who couldn't wait, but once he presented them to our enemy, he forgave this subject and claimed the dwarves as his own children. The men were meant to be mortal, as that is the gift of our enemy, as they would mature and grow weary much quicker than the elves. The elves' immortality was also a gift from our enemy. In addition to all that, they would also each have their own languages. Now that I've made my point about customs, let's stick to the custom of the hobbits. The hobbits are meant to never go on any adventures or do anything out of the norm of what hobbits usually do, which is to stay in their cozy little holes and do the same thing day in and day out, smoking, farming, and gardening. They would also speak the same language, the common speech. However, our enemy made each creature in his unique design, which means that some elves, or dwarves, or men, or hobbits in this case, will cross over into the design and customs of the other types of subjects. I convinced them that Bilbo's early life was quiet and comfortable in Bag End, so why go now? Bilbo also knew Elvish and was passionate about it. This would aid him in his writings about his adventures. He was also willing to teach it to Frodo and Sam. But for what? See, our enemy made him a unique kind of hobbit as he did all the other ones. While technically hobbits are descendants of men, our enemy also created them too. So, he also created hobbits. But with that came the customs. But he created Bilbo in a manner that he was meant to have different desires than the average hobbit. He is a hobbit, not an elf or dwarf, and our goal is to remind him of that. Finally, we would have to change our main subject from Bilbo to Frodo, as Frodo now has the One Ring. Frodo could hardly wait to inherit his cousin's place, and meanwhile, your ring is lying somewhere over there. But we are very busy. Your master, Melkor Morgoth. Dear Sauron, the hobbits are now at the house of Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil is now looking for water lilies and spent a few nights there, and on this final night, Frodo would have a vision of the sea. We have mentioned just how peculiar Frodo and Bilbo are. See, our enemy uses dreams to foreshadow things such as the sea, and Frodo's is no exception. Earlier, he had the same dream in Crickhollow of going to the Undying Lands. This is because our enemy wants him to believe that he will one day go to the sea. See, unlike his companions, no one would know what happens to Frodo at the end of the Third Age. He wants to go there now, but before that, he and his friends must take the journey to Mordor with your ring. The whole Shire has been talking for a while. It's not right for a hobbit to associate oneself with the elves or go to the Undying Lands. It's just weird. Soon, he would vow to do some ridiculous tasks, becoming some sort of elf friend and taking a ring to Rivendell. Oh, Valinor, this brings me some of the worst memories, as early in the First Stage, that was where I was chained. As the first elves discovered Cuiviénen, the Valar immediately battled against me and they were victorious. I had to go back home to Autumno with my servants. Wait, no, it actually started much earlier, like the earlier days during the Ainulindale, where I was bitter as our enemy, Eru, had the ability to create life when I was stuck on the sidelines. So shortly after that, I captured many of the first elves and turned them into orcs. Our enemy was so upset that I did this, but who can you blame anyways? Wouldn't you have wanted to create life like Eru did? Who wouldn't anyways? Let me take you back to the same dream Frodo had in Crickhollow. He fell into a vague dream, in which he seemed to be looking out of a high window over a dark sea of tangled trees. Down below among the roots there was a sound of creatures crawling and snuffling. He felt sure they would smell him out sooner or later. Then he heard a noise in the distance. At first he thought it was a great wind coming over the leaves of the forest. Then he knew that it was not leaves, but the sound of the sea far off, a sound he had never heard in waking life, though it had often troubled his dreams. Suddenly he found he was out in the open. There were no trees after all. He was on a dark heath, and there was a strange salt smell in the air. Looking up, he saw before him a tall white tower standing alone on a high ridge. A great desire came over him to climb the tower and see the sea. He started to struggle up the ridge towards the tower, but suddenly a light came in the sky, and there was a noise of thunder. This was further confirmed last night at the house of Bombadil, as he sees a far green country under a swift sunrise. Life is not about being a ring bearer and then going to the sea with the elves. It's about following customs, even those you hate, and staying the way you've always been in the way that every other hobbit was. A normal hobbit, as he will say. The elves had nothing to do with him after all. Should he ever make it back to the Shire successfully, we would tell him that he is stuck there forever, since that's where he belongs. Much like the elves, Frodo longs for the sea, the Grey Havens, a thought that has never occurred in his mind before this very moment in Crickhollow. But that remains just that, a dream. It's not like he's ever going to make it to the Grey Havens. After all, hobbits are descendants of men, and men are no longer allowed in the Undying Lands. This is our doing as we end in Numenor. Much like men, Frodo, a hobbit, is immortal and his fate is tied to death. This is especially true after the downfall of Numenor. However, according to our enemy, the past remains in the past, and the Undying Lands will be open to certain non-elves, such as ring-bearers. Frodo now has the ring en route to Rivendell, and friends of the Eldar as Gimli would be. Now, why exactly is this possible venture to the Undying Lands mentioned at this point? It seems it could be spiritual, perhaps. It's because our enemy wants the ring-bearers to go to some sort of purgatory and peace afterwards, as it goes to show how strong you and your powers are. This will work within Frodo's subconscious, just like all dreams do. However, our goal is to make him forget about it altogether. See, he hasn't really heard of the sea, and now he already longs for it. How foolish! That's what we must repeat to Frodo. This is the deed of our enemy. Our enemy thinks that Frodo is destined for the sea and wants to somehow recruit him into a society meant just for elves. I say this is a foolish idea. The subtlety of our work really comes into play when a hobbit decides to be a ring bearer. After all, everyone knows that hobbits are so resistant to the ring. Remember that you made your ring so that no one will willfully destroy it. Let them carry the ring to Mordor and then they'll see just how strong we are. Now, back to the topic. Then he has another one at Tom Bombadil's house, where they are right now. Meanwhile, Pippin has a nightmare dreaming that he was trapped inside Old Man Willow, which would be your typical childhood nightmare. Then Merry also has one, though it's less of your typical childhood nightmare than Pippin's, as it was about the land slowly flooding. Okay then, finally we get to the topic. Frodo has two dreams. One of them is the past event, as even though he didn't quite know it happened at the time, Gandalf escapes Isengard at the first one. This next one, however, is when he sees the White Tower again, just like in Crick Hollow. So it happened again. Big deal, see, the house of Tom Bombadil seems to give these hobbits some prophetic dreams. It seems Sam is the one who didn't have any clear prophetic one, as he slept through the night in deep content. See, that first night, when Frodo had a nightmare much like Merry and Pippin, that was our doing, as he would later wake up to the sound of the Black Riders, again also our doing, wondering if he should really go on this quest. We rejoice as she shrieks in terror, wondering whether he was to go on the quest to destroy your ring. He was dreaming of a moon rising over a circle of hills with a tall tower, which stood a white-haired figure, and the eagle went across the moon, snatching the figure from the tower as the figure raised a staff, causing a bright flash. Meanwhile, the riders are en route to the prancing pony at Bree. See, Tom Bombadil and Goldberry like to say that their house is free of evil things. But we were able to give them nightmares, especially Frodo, as he would be the one making the chief decisions of the quest. Unfortunately, on this other night, he saw the White Tower again, much like what he did at Crick Hollow, as our chief enemies assured him of their uniqueness, caw, and courage. Keeping the One Ring under your influence of power, Melkor Morgoth. My servant, Elrond's council is underway. Our subjects, which include elves, dwarves, men, and hobbits, are there with Elrond to decide what to do with the ring. We have finally made them aware of our powers. Elrond and Bilbo will be telling most of it, as Elrond was the head and Bilbo found the ring. Along with them were Boromir, who wanted to find the meaning of his brother's dream, Gimli and his father Gloin, Legolas and Galdor. Boromir wanted to use the ring to defend Gondor, but Gandalf and Elrond were against it, saying the ring would corrupt and destroy whomever that tried to use it. Thankfully, your ring can only be unmade where it was created, so it'll be a long ways away before we even get destroyed. Rejoice! However, our main gripe is that anyone will even dare destroy the ring. We've got to get going. Don't let up. The ring is not to be hidden or disposed, as it would be dangerous afterwards. Thus, the only way for it to be destroyed is to cast it in the fires of Mount Doom where it was made. Your ring was designed that way. It was designed to control all the others. However, the elves had the 3 rings, which meant when you finally made the one, they heard you and took it off. They realized they had been deceived. Thankfully, you were able to claim the 3. Unfortunately, you were defeated in a war of the Last Alliance and weren't exactly aware enough for Bilbo, who would offer to finish what he started only for his plan to be rejected. Meanwhile, at this point, Frodo already left the ring in Rivendell. The elves are a little less likely to battle than the men and hobbits and maybe dwarves. Bear with me. This will be a long day, thanks to our enemy. First, Frodo will be presented as the one who brought your ring to Rivendell. However, what few know that's also very concerning to us is that a year ago, a messenger came to Dane from Mordor, saying that you, Lord Sauron the Great, wished for a certain friendship and urgently asked concerning hobbits. This was so you could control Moria at first, but for Sauron knows, one of these was known to you at the time. So Gloin was told by Dane that Bilbo is sought by you. By then, he also desired it. They want to know why, but that's an easy answer, because you made it so. See, the reason why they're having this council is because Elrond knew the most about the forging of your ring, and the three rings, aside from us, of course, as well as Numenor and Isildur, Spain. See, Elrond believes that during that time, many eyes were turned to him as the elven smiths at Moria had a desire for knowledge, his, as a matter of fact. Thus, he believed your ring to be their master. Also, between that time and Numenor, the last alliance was made by the faithful, those who followed the will of our enemy. See, you were much stronger back then. During the time of Isildur, Spain, you just came out of destroying Numenor as we messed with the mind of our affairs on the final king of Numenor. This was our ultimate plan all along. See, the Valar thought their band was for the good of the Numenorians. Remember the difference between the faithful and the king's men, far apart from one another, divided in the discord we've created. Even better yet, the faithful are in the minority. Unlike the faithful, the king's men were able to build the pride and wealth of the Isle. Much like what Elrond did for Rivendell, the faithful built a haven, Pelargir, in 2350 of the Second Age, all the way in southern Gondor, while the king's men had havens farther south. They sure know how to escape us. We rejoiced as the rift between the faithful and the king's men widened after the reign of Tar and Kaliman, Autonomir's son. Unfortunately, your powers haven't been as strong since Isildur, Spain, which occurred shortly after the downfall of Numenor. As Gondor endured, after the victory of the last alliance and your ring was lost, fruitless did I call the victory of the last alliance, not wholly so, yet it did not achieve its end. You were diminished but not destroyed. Your ring was lost but not unmade. The Dark Tower was broken, but its foundations were not removed, for they were made with the power of the ring, and while it remains, we will endure. Many elves and many mighty men and many other friends had perished in the war. Never again shall there be any such league of elves and men, for men multiply and the firstborn decreased, and the two kindreds are estranged. This was our doing, as we sought to estrange the elves and men. Those were the days when our destructions were at our peak, before the elves and men created secret havens like Pelargir, and more importantly, when we were able to deceive them more easily. See, we deceived them well in the last alliance, especially Isildur, who perished after taking a ring, but this was a time when things started to get difficult and we were kept at our toes. Shortly after, they created Minas Ithil, so we made Minas Morgul. Still, our subjects experienced the aftermath of our destruction, shorter lifespans, decaying of an entire race of Numenor, and the estrangement of the elves and men. However, the lords of Minas Tirith still fight on, defying our enemies, keeping the passage of the river from Argonath to the sea. We have to put up forces too, which we had, as Boromir notes, that one of our allies, the nameless enemy, has arisen again. Meanwhile, he also says, the might of Elrond is in wisdom, not in weapons, which is why battles used to be more productive. This is what we have feared, as the elves, men, dwarves, and hobbits seek to fight more strategically by studying our powers' influences in this council. This makes it harder for us to persuade them to come to our side. Now, people want to find other means, such as wisdom and knowledge and knowing about your ring. As the incarnates start to know more about your ring, they will have a stronger force, so we should too. Which we did. We almost turned Frodo into a wraith. But that's still just because he has your ring. See, at the end of the Second Age, you were able to wash out almost, if not an entire race of the Numenorians. The key difference is that now, We have to focus on the ring bearers, especially whomever that ends up carrying your ring. This is wholly unlike the Númenóreans who didn't need to carry a ring to be deceived. See, our enemy thinks the ring is to be destroyed eventually, as our subjects look forward to having a peaceful life when they all get back home. Maybe except Bilbo and Frodo, who have dreams of going west. This is because our enemy wants to use our subjects to aid in reducing our powers. Do they know we, too, have a body and a spirit? Using that logic, as the ring gets destroyed, so would your power, but your spirit will remain immortal. This is why it's so hard for the ring bearer to let it go. It's because you, Sauron, needed to be at your peak. While our subjects think it's because of their powers like invisibility and youthful looks, that's true, but these things come from you and your powers. We just have to keep that momentum for as long as we can. To our subject, who would be the ring bearer, it's exciting and addicting to have a device that will allow them to choose when to be invisible and also to slow their inevitable aging. It's like a book that can't be put down. But little do they know, our forces are working, bit by bit, within that book getting stronger as the reader reaches its house of origin. We don't want anyone near Mordor. Thankfully, Mordor allied itself with the Easterlings and the Haradrim. As Aragorn is introduced, Frodo sees him, believing as he is the heir of Isildur, Aragorn is the ring's rightful owner. Unfortunately, Aragorn saw through that, though this is when the ring is to be revealed. Our chance for our powers to finally be seen. There, Frodo's mind goes back and forth, wavering in the disorder and the chaos we have constructed. Let's make the most of this. Meanwhile, Gandalf knows about our tactics. At the worst, said he, we know that they have it not, and that it still is lost. But what is lost will be found. On a side note, Gandalf also claims to be swayed by Saruman the Wise, which was our doing. Poor Gandalf. For 17 years he has been out researching your ring. Oh, how we loathe when one gains wisdom. Those were the worst years of my life, right up there with the time when Elrond found this dreaded place. With that being said, I think we both know now that elves are not easy to fool, but men are easier to fool, which is especially evident at the end of the Second Age with the downfall of Númenor and Isildur's bane. After all, Isildur described it as a dark object in his note, but still decided to keep it. We even destroyed an elf, Gil-galad, by the heat of your fiery hand at the siege of Barad-dûr. This was after a siege of 7 years. Stay tuned. Keeping the One Ring at your power, Melkor Morgoth. Dear Sauron, even the wise might fear to withstand the 9, as Gandalf says. These are the 9 rings used to corrupt men. Well, duh. This is why men are easier to fool. They just didn't need to be the ring bearers like Bilbo and Frodo would. As we have mentioned earlier, the time for the elves and Númenor are gone, while the time for the men is just beginning, which is pure evidence that our glory days of the powers were long gone as well. Even though men were easier to fool, that goes to show you were much stronger back then as you were able to deceive the Númenóreans. Meanwhile, Frodo also finds what delayed Gandalf, which we do know about, as Gandalf had a fight and was captured by Saruman, which we certainly approve. The fruits of our work are shown all the way from before Gandalf left, as he was still in the Shire, with his judgment clouded as he rode to the southern borders. At first he thought it was one of us, but then he found out it was Radagast who would inform him of the Nazgul. They have taken the guise of riders in black, he says. Soon after, he was following the hobbits all alone. However, he was able to escape Weathertop, though he couldn't find Frodo. That was because our Nazgul captured him when he wore the ring. We always know how to find the most hidden places to destroy. See, I think we both know now that Frodo's our chief victim, as he was the one with your ring. This is all about what we are after. We are all about lies, sneakiness and deception, as we don't create, but rather we destroy. The essence of the lie is that it allows us to reclaim our power so that your ring will remain yours. Our lie to our subjects, that they will achieve immortality by going into the West, was our key to destroying Numenor. However, now, our subjects are wiser as they know the ring as more than just a magic ring, which they didn't before. See, with the Numenorians, we targeted the kings that were proud and greedy, as they were most likely to be jealous and desire immortality of the Eldar and the Valar. Then, after that, we had to start targeting the ring bearers. We convinced Isildur to keep the ring, which he did, even as Elrond counseled him to give it up. Now, we hear Gandalf talking about being swayed by Saruman. As he writes to Frodo, he was en route to Saruman's gate, as Saruman called him to the foot of Orthanc and saw a ring on his finger. Saruman was initially a chief member of the Istari, though we were able to sway him to come to our side. As a result, we rejoiced as he amassed himself as one of us, as Frodo talks about how fitting it was that he had a dream about this very moment, without knowing that the deed really happened. The truth was that Gandalf's plight was much worse than what Frodo heard. Cha-ching! See, first it seemed to him that Radagast had also fallen. Then, Saruman would try to undo his plot, as this is what we are about. Then one of the eagles, j.r.r, found Gandalf standing on the pinnacle, as the eagles saw many things on our part: the mustering of orcs, gathering of wolves, and the 9 riders, all whom knew about the escape of Gollum, who had the ring about a few hundred years ago. Then Gandalf was sent to Rohan, which unfortunately signified his gaining of wisdom on the ring as he saw Saruman's lies. Saruman just wanted to see what's going on, but Gandalf had to take things way too far by messing with your ring. This is our time to shine, as Aragorn would say, your forces are stronger than ever before. Then Saruman must be a noble heart indeed, he says, and it grieves me more than many tidings I might seem worse to learn that Sauron levies such tribute. It was not so when last I was in that land. It's time for us to strengthen our forces so your ring and our powers would remain ours. Notice how I keep going back to this? This is because this is our main goal that we're working towards. Much like the Hobbits and the future Fellowship are planning on casting a ring, and subsequently our powers, into the fire, we are planning on strengthening our forces so that our powers would remain ours. Elrond will be saddened to hear this news, and this is also where we rejoice. Until now, he was blissfully unaware that Saruman successfully became one of us. Who would have thought? Mwahahaha! After all, he was originally the chief member of the Istari. Meanwhile, he reveals to the council that the ring can't be destroyed by him or Elrond, and Galdor suspects that you, Sauron, will expect them to take the Western way when you learn what has befallen. Another reason why we must strengthen our forces to keep the council from succeeding in their task to destroy the ring into the fire. Elrond unfortunately confirms what we have feared all along. The ring must be shunned. It will be watched. Too often the elves have fled that way. Now at this last we must take a hard road, a road unforeseen. There lies our hope, if hope it be, to walk into peril to Mordor. We must send the ring into the fire. Then Frodo would dare ask how Saruman came to be. We'll tell you, Frodo. It's because Saruman used to be the chief Istari, though he became one of us. But since we are all about deception, we were able to hide that from Gandalf, who so dearly trusted him for longer than he would know. It also goes to show we did the same with Frodo. Elrond would say that they can't use it, as it belongs to you, after Boromir wants to take the ring to Minas Tirith and use it. The very desire of it corrupts the heart, said he, as he describes why you made the ring. For nothing is evil in the beginning, even you, Sauron, were not so. Meanwhile, Bilbo would offer to finish the quest, perhaps to have something to write in his book. or also because we have made the ring so that it is impossible to resist. After all, your ring, Sauron, gave Bilbo invisibility and youthfulness that few his age were able to achieve. Gandalf commends his offer, though suggested that since Bilbo has had the ring for quite a while, he would rather the ring go to one of the 4 hobbits. We shall see who it is. Your Honorable Master, Morgoth. P.S. See, the reason why Gandalf didn't appoint the task to Bilbo is because he thinks Bilbo is too old. Those hobbits, poor mortals. After all, you and I are thousands of years old, and were when you forged the One Ring. P.P.S. Elrond appointed the task to Frodo, saying that if he doesn't, no one else can. You don't really need to know this anyways, just as long as you find the ring bearer one day. This is because our enemy, through that small voice of his, said, "I will take the ring, though I do not know the way." This means we must wait and see. He does, however, get recognized again as an elf friend along with the likes of Hador, Horin, Turin, and Beren, which brings some of the worst memories as we hang our heads low in misery, waiting for our next attack. I have a horrible feeling that the ring might actually be destroyed.